Welcome, and thanks for joining. I'd like to get a little bit practical. How does the questions work within relationships? And we'll divide into three types of relationships: employee, employer, friends, and parents and children. Let's start with the first one. You have an employer. And by the way, this doesn't always work for everyone, but it could work 70-80% of the time, if not more. You have an employer that you see comes here 2 minutes late, comes there 2 minutes late. That's real. You see it. You're not making it up. There's definitely a problem. But as we spoke earlier, it's just a few pieces of the puzzle. There's a bigger picture. The typical way to deal with it is just a warning, and out the door they go, and then have someone else. You sit down with this employee as if you loved him. Pretend you loved him. Because to me, everything in the world is relationships. Everything is it's all about relationships. And the most respectful way, and you don't have to use my words, you could be way more respectful, because I'm not even putting in effort. If I would put in effort, I guess I would be even more respectful. We hired you 7-8 months ago. I see what you do and specify some stuff that this employee does. But yet, we've noticed that, in the mornings you're 5 minutes late. And after the break, you're 5 minutes late, and sometimes you're already putting things together before time is up. Tell me what's going on. You noticed there was no threat, there was no judgment. The message that I got as an employee right now by hearing you say that was, you're trying to gather information. So I'm not stupid. Let's say I'm the employee, I'm not stupid. I see you're noticing I'm cutting the corners. The first thing is, human beings, come on, blame. So I right away have a blame, it's not me. Well, I really enjoyed what I was doing the first few weeks, the first few months with the supervisor. To be honest with you, could you please not repeat it to him? And the employee breaks down crying. And I hear these stories on a weekly, monthly basis. The employee breaks down crying, and he says, I'm not going to justify me coming late, but you asked me what's going on, I'll tell you what's going on. And isn't that interesting now that the boss now receives more pieces of the puzzle, because I've mentioned what you see is not a picture. The fact that an employee comes late is not a picture, it's just a few pieces of the picture. And the employee breaks them crying, and doesn't break them crying, and saying the supervisor is mistreating him. And the employee goes on and on and on in many details. And then we could fast forward of how the conversation will go. Now, in a very similar case where there is no excuse, okay? What you could do, obviously, if this is a small company and you have that relationship, as I mentioned before, you cannot do this in all companies when you have 15,000 employees and you have a whole bunch of them, a few hundred are slacking off. But if you have a small business and you tell the employee, look, you noticed recently, obviously after you told him the positive about him, that a few minutes late, leave a few minutes early, you just want to have a chat about it. And the person could just say the following: okay, I'll make sure everything changes between me and you know that as well. It might change just for a few days and it's going to go back to the old path. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He said he's going to change it. If he's from the 30% that he's going to change it because he noticed that someone notices it, he might. If he's from the 70% that will not change, and he'll slip right back to his bad habit, which he had for the last 20 years, and that's why he went from business to business, don't give up yet. Call him in again and say, wow, you were just amazing for a week and a half, and you're like a clock. You actually came early. You were ahead of other people, blah, 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 blah. But again, you noticed it. What's going on? And here he gets stuck. And with dignity and with a question, you could say the following. I love questions. The question is, what can you do to change it? So employees are so used to listening to a boss, listening to a parent. They're just continuing the very unhealthy of listening, of being a sheep. And there's nothing wrong with listening. But there is something wrong of a person not taking responsibility, initiative, involvement, getting involved, and just loving what they do. By the fact you asked the employee, what can you do to change this? You don't have to tell me. You don't even have to tell me. I want you to come up with a plan, not a goodwill. Goodwill usually has an expiry date. Bullshit has an expiry date. Goodwill has an expiry date. And fantasy has an expiry date. It just has an expiry date. Some people could last with goodwill for 3 days, maybe some for 21 and a half days, but they usually have an expiry date. So you explain to this person goodwill is very good, but doesn't last. And I can't really spend every week calling you in and reminding you you're taking responsibility. Which means, if you want to continue within this company, I'm leaving the decision in your hands. Isn't that brilliant? You basically told him you're firing, but it's not you're firing him. He is firing himself if he doesn't come up. Now the ball's in his court. This person or she must come up with something in their mind. Some of them that will feel comfortable will say, it's very easy. You know, I have this bad habit of going to sleep late. I think instead of 12:31, I think it's going to happen 10:30, 11. And yeah. But regardless, if you come to me for advice, I could sit down for an hour and just describe so many different scenarios based on who your employee is. But respect and getting the picture is so important. Getting the whole picture is so important. Thanks for joining, and have a wonderful and delightful day.